Are you listening? Damn.
And welcome back once again to the Endurance Hour podcast. This is episode 353, a big one because Wendy had a huge race over the weekend. So we're going to talk about this major ultra trail run that she did and some topics surrounding that and some feedback she's been getting. I want to kick it off just by saying thank you to all the members inside the T2 Endurance group on Facebook, 691 strong. Wendy, will you give a little recap on how this started and how this has been growing and how the community has been interacting over the last few years?
Yes, we started the T2 Endurance Facebook group, T2 as in T2 Coaching, Endurance as in Endurance Hour, which is your business, in March of 2017. And back then we kicked it off because March is National Nutrition Month. So we kicked it off with some nutrition challenges. We invited people that we knew personally to join our group. And then over the years, people have found out about us just by searching Endurance Hour. They see us on YouTube. We sell training programs on Training Peaks. And within those plans are invitations to join our T2 Endurance group. And I feel like it's just a safe place to ask questions, make comments, share your struggles, share your successes, whatever you want. It's pretty safe place.
Yeah, we have a vetting process where we ask you a couple of questions so we know that you're for real. Not anybody can just join. So again, safe. We actually have 3 requests now. And the questions are, how'd you hear about the group? So you have to answer it so we know you're not a robot. What kind of events are you training for? And do you have a Training Peaks account? Why do we ask them about Training Peaks?
Most endurance athletes know what Training Peaks is, and that's where we sell all of our programs. So it just gives us an idea of people who have maybe found us through our Training Peaks programs or just endurance athletes in general. If you're not an endurance athlete, chances are high you're not going to know what Training Peaks even is. So it kind of just helps us, create that community of endurance-minded individuals and not just let anyone else in.
Right. So the first one is from Krista, and she says she heard about us through YouTube because we have a couple thousand videos on YouTube on the Endurance Hour YouTube channel, and she's training for or interested in a half Ironman. By the way, Oceanside is kick off this coming weekend. Oceanside 70.3, or I guess it's called Oceanside 70.3.
Yeah, so is Texas 70.3.
Ooh, both of them in Galveston?
Yeah. I think that one's in Galveston, yeah.
Yeah, I'm getting updates on my Facebook, so many years ago on this day in history, and I covered Galveston the year that Lance raced it, and that must have been 2012.
Nice.
So I'm getting these updates. Hey, 10 years ago on this day, and there, my interviews. Oh yeah, it was like interviews with Leanna Cave, Chris Lieto, Marino von Honacker. Who else was there? And some other people. And Tim O'Donnell. That was a race in which Lance was coming around to the finish line, and he was currently in 5th place. And this guy named something Jordan Jones maybe, who sprinted around him, who was in 6th place, to take 5th place. And Lance was just kind of trotting around, but this other guy looked like he was like, I don't know, sandbagging it, like, I'm going to sprint past him because, I've been in 6th place the whole day, but now I'm going to sprint past Lance Armstrong. But thinking about it afterwards, there's some prize money involved for a 5th place person versus 6th place. And Lance is not about the money, he wanted to do well. So this guy came across the line and took 5th place, and people were like, oh, this guy just sprinted past him just to sprint past him. Well, I'm sure he's trying to make a little money.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's weird. Okay, just flashback. So 70.3 Texas this weekend, and Oceanside.
It's kind of the weekend, the launch of North America World Triathlon Corporation events is this weekend, usually the first weekend of April.
And in a few months, we have, less than a few months, the new location for the Ironman World Championship being replaced in St. George.
Right, the 2021 Ironman World Championship.
Crazy. All right. So anyways, Krista, well, she does have a Training Peaks account, so that's going to validate her. She's 392 now. Then we have a couple other here that I'm just not quite sure about yet. Bill requested, and he says he heard about us, my friend telling. The grammar is not there, but my friend telling, that's how he heard about the group. What kind of events are you training for or interested in? Racing. He does have a Training Peaks account. I have to look into his profile a little bit more. And then Ahmed, who is from Egypt. What kind of events are you training for? Endurance ride. Didn't answer the first question, and no on the training peaks. So I got to look at his profile a little closer because he has a lot of games on his profile picture, his feed, which always makes me, he wants to play Family Farm together. I don't know if that's really the kind of, I don't know. I don't want to quickly judge someone just by some of the games they play on Facebook. But I'll look into that a little bit more. We're going to stick with just a couple of members for right now. All right, that out of the way. Wendy, you did a 74 mile-ish trail run this weekend. And what's really cool about this is I saw your results on Strava, and it's like 74 segments or 72 mile split times. It's like, oh my God, I've never seen somebody with so many split times for miles. But that was the nature of the course.
Yeah, and it was really hard.
Was it over 72 miles? Did you have an exact number?
So my GPS, so when I stop at aid stations, especially for like in an ultra, you stop for an extended period of time, minutes at a time. My GPS stops, and then usually when I start going again, it could take a minute or two to kind of refine the GPS. So I believe it was closer to 74 and not 72. And then when I'm going too slow, like parts of the uphills and parts of the downhills, my GPS will not read any distance. And especially like the last 3 miles, part of that was going up a flight of, I think it was 475 steps. My GPS does not read because I'm walking up steps at a very slow pace. So even though my Garmin recorded 72 miles, I believe it was closer to 74-ish, like they say on the website. Right. It's a 74-ish mile race.
And you were faster than, you made the cutoff by, 4 or 5 hours?
Yes.
It's a 25-hour cutoff for the 74-mile race, which you'd have to average just under 4 miles per hour or around a little over 3 miles per hour? It
was about, I believe I did the calculations. Everything is kind of a fog, but I believe it was, if to go 25 hours, you had to average a 20-minute mile. And this year, the elevation gain was 17,000. So 17,000 feet of elevation gain and loss. And in the beginning, I thought, if I just walk it or hike it, I should be able to make the cutoff. And I'm gonna say no. I don't think if I just walked or hiked it, I could have made the 25-hour cutoff. It definitely involves some running. And there was some places that you could run at a decent pace, meaning you could run at like I did, a 10-minute mile on some of the downhill sections of the dirt road. So it's definitely, it's called the Georgia Death Race for a reason, and it definitely lived up to its name.
What do you mean, for a reason? People die in that race?
People don't die in the race, but it's just it's just challenging in ways that I didn't expect, mentally and physically. I think physically I knew what to expect, but mentally I didn't know what to expect. Mentally, it kind of threw me for a loop.
What surprised you mentally?
Mentally, my mental strength changed. What I was thinking mentally changed from when I signed up to the actual race day event. Things happen. You have to sign up for events so far in advance. And, I can't remember. I think the date that this race opened was sometime in November or December. So not too far. No, I signed up way before that. I actually probably sometime midsummer. So when you sign up for this race, it's kind of like an Ironman. It's going to fill up. And it filled up within a couple hours. And so when I signed up, I had recently done a 50-mile race called the Cruel Jewel, which is part of the similar course. So I thought, I just did 50 miles. I had some struggles. I learned a lot. And that usually drives me to want to keep training and change the way I train to prepare a little bit better physically. And normally it's when I break down physically, like my quads, hamstrings, calves, whatever my body part is kind of fatiguing, it's usually my mental strategies that can help me overcome that. And so for this particular race, I knew what I needed to change physically between the Cruel Jewel that I did in May of 2021 until the Georgia Death Race March of 2022, which was more more hill repeats, continue to get more comfortable running downhill on a trail, as well as a different strength training strategy. And all of that worked really well. But the mental strength that I had when I signed up, like, how hard can it be? It's 24 more miles than what I did. It's on the same course. I have 25 hours to do it. I mean, I was a little bit casual about it. I had more confidence. And then when it came to the actual race day, I didn't want to do it. And, there were a lot of reasons. My father had passed away 2 weeks ago before the race. So my mental state of mind was a little bit different than it normally is before a race. And I just couldn't comprehend and get my mind over having to do like another marathon distance after 50 miles. And I struggled all week. Like all week, I'm trying to come up with strategies and trying to convince myself, my why, you have 25 hours. This is why you sign up for the race. But that was really hard for me that I'm like, I don't care. I just don't want to do it. I just don't want to start. I don't want to have to get up at 2 a.m. I just don't want to have to put myself through the ultra running type of pain. And I did it. I just didn't want to. And I've never had that happen to me. Usually I thrive on challenges and I thrive on, knowing what I'm getting myself into. And I think part of it is I knew what I was getting myself into because I had the experience with the training and the Cruel Jewel 50 miler last year, that I'm just like, why? So I had to question my why for 20 hours.
Were you just obsessed with the idea all week? You couldn't get it out of your head because every day leading up to it was preparation for the day?
Yeah, I think so. When people ask you when you train for any endurance event, whether it's a run or triathlon or whatever it is, for those people who ask you who don't really have that experience or mindset, they're like, why do you do that? And it's like, well, because I'm excited, because it's a challenge. It's fun in a different way. But the week before the race, I'm like, I kind of understand why people question why I do this, because I just don't have the answer right now. I had a hard time coming up with my why all week. I couldn't.
Well, didn't you have one before, though?
My why was not strong. My why was not strong, at least so I thought.
But you had a why before. Did the why disappear, or maybe the definition of your why changed? Because
I think my definition was changing, and I couldn't. My original why wasn't good enough.
You couldn't hold on to that why. It didn't have a good foundation.
It didn't have a good foundation, and I had a hard time like saying that. Well, that's a good enough why. And it obviously was, because I finished, but I really just, for the first time in my life ever, and I've been doing, endurance sports for 30 years, I just really mentally struggled, and it bothered me a lot, because that's usually my strength, is the mental component. And again, looking back in hindsight, obviously I still have the mental strength because I finished. It was just a real struggle. I fell 7 times, so obviously there was some fatigue there. I cried a lot. I called my husband Don a lot to be like, I just don't want to be out here anymore. Maybe you should come get me. But at the same time, I knew, I kept going back to the pain of not finishing is probably worse than the pain that I'm going through right now, physically and mentally. That helped me keep going, even though emotionally I was a wreck. I was a total roller coaster emotionally for 20 hours.
I think this is a quote that's been repeated. I don't know the origin of the quote, but I've heard someone say it recently. And they said, when you're going through hell, why stop? You're in hell, keep going to get out of it. So what's the point of stopping in hell if you're already there? Keep going. It's going to pass. It has to pass. And maybe your experience and your why was strong, but your willpower was stronger to push you through. And they say, quitting's forever. So to get you through is like, I'm not going to quit. This is going to suck. Maybe the why wasn't strong enough, but I have willpower to fight through this, because I'm not a quitter, and I don't want to have that feeling that I've made it this far. I got to keep on going. Why stop now?
Right. And that's actually what kept me going. And at the same time, I just had this, I just don't care. I'm at mile 54. That's where I could see my crew, which was my husband. And that was the best chance of me
Pulling out.
exiting the race. And then I'm like, how can I pull out now? I'm way ahead of the cutoff. I'm in fifth place. It wouldn't be right for those people who won't make the cutoff and who can't finish. It wouldn't be right.
Yes.
And that actually drove me. Normally, when I think of telling the kids that I coach that I quit, normally that totally perks me up and makes me motivated. But I kept telling myself, like, you're going to tell these kids you quit? And I'm like, sure, why not? I don't care. It was that I don't care feeling that I really haven't experienced, because usually I get energized with trail running and racing and competition, and I thrive on the challenge, and I thrive on how difficult what I'm doing is making me, how it makes me feel. But it was just a weird thing for me to feel. And, I'm still, for me, relatively a new ultra runner, that every time I show up to these things, it's like when you show up to your very first Ironman, or maybe very first event ever. I felt like I was an imposter, a poser. I felt like I don't belong here. Look at all these people. They have the look, they just look like ultra runners. I don't, they're more experienced than me. They know what they're doing. I don't. And I felt that way, not when I started ultra running, because when I started ultra running, I knew I was a newbie. Like it was just a different emotional feeling. But now that I have experience, I still feel like a newbie. And I always feel like, oh my God, I just don't belong here. I'm a triathlete. I'm not an ultra runner. What am I doing here? And I bring this point up of imposter syndrome because I've actually heard about it on a podcast a few weeks ago. But another athlete who purchased our Couch to Sprint program emailed me a couple days ago, and he said the same thing. He's like, I'm doing my very first sprint. I'm very nervous. I feel like a poser. I feel like I'm not going to be ready. And he hasn't even started the program yet. And so I'm coaching him through like the training plan, and I'm telling him, once you get started and build the confidence through training, that'll change your mindset. So I really had to coach myself for 20 hours while I was out on that trail. I had to go back and say, what would I tell another athlete? What would I coach another athlete about their mentality right now?
Boy, this hits home in a different way of, I've become a dart player in the last 4 years. In 2018, as an adult now, I'm starting to play darts. It's called soft tip darts as opposed to steel tip darts. And you'll see soft tip dart boards in bars because they're safer and everyone can play it. It's electronic. And I find myself getting confident sometimes. And then I find myself going, I don't belong in this group. I'm just a guy who's playing darts. I'm having some success here and there. And then I play on Tuesday nights in our league, our season. And I had a bad average for one of my types of games. And I was starting to really like, God, I'm not as good as I think I am. And it was like beating myself up, negative self-talk. But I had to recoach myself throughout this process. And after I got home, I was quiet the whole time home. I was like, how you have that 1,000-yard stare? You've heard about that in the military. Yeah. I'm driving home, just staring out the window, and not even just kind of blank. It's like a 35-minute drive home. And I'm going, I'm better than this. I'm better than that. I was just like almost blank, like this is terrible. Not that I'm going to give up or anything, but this is terrible. I got home, I write down my stats because I keep track of my stats, and I realized it wasn't my worst night, and it's actually I was better on average than I was last season, but I'm way above what I normally. I'm way above what I was last season, but I played even better than I played last season, but it still wasn't my best. Anyways, I was trying to say to myself, don't worry, don't let this one game, one day throw you off, because when I'm looking at my averages, this is just facts. I'm the top rated player in our group. There's a guy behind me who's catching up, but I was so nervous about this other guy catching up statistically that I thought, I just blew it. Turns out I didn't. I'm still ahead of this guy, but I talked myself into like, you're not that good anymore. But in a way, I needed to ground myself, like get back to doing what you do to go back to doing what you did to get here. And that's just sticking to what you do in practice.
Right. And that goes back to me, enjoying the process. Mm-hmm. So I'd done so many awesome training days leading up to this race. Like I said, I implemented a new strength training program. I got more trail running experience. I felt like I loved everything I did. I went to some new trails. I love trail running. Again, it goes back to do what you love what you do. Mm. And the whole process of that was much more important. It's always more important that I enjoy the process than the actual outcome, because there's so many factors that affect the outcome of an event. But it goes back to this training versus racing mindset. In training, I'm in control. If I'm having a bad day in training, I can just stop. No one's going to know. I'm on my own time frame. If I cut my run a couple miles short or go a couple miles longer, that's on me, and that's my choice based on how I'm feeling that day. When you race, you have to show up on that day. No matter where you are physically or mentally, you signed up for a race that happens on this day, and if you don't show up, you don't get a chance to do it. And so sometimes for me, racing, because racing is such a fixed day and time, and there's so many things that can happen to you in life before race date that can actually make that what happens on that one day a little bit more challenging. Like I already mentioned, my father passing 2 weeks before the race. So I think everything for me just, emotionally fell on this one day. And I let out a lot of emotion, on this one day. But I definitely reminded me how much I really do enjoy the training process more than the race day, because race day is just such a mental mindset. And I always try to go into a race like it's another day of training. And if the Georgia Death Race on March 26th was another day of training, I would not have run 74 miles that day.
Yeah, there's this. I follow this tennis coach. I found him because he was doing a motivational speech to an athlete, or he was just coaching up an athlete in tennis. And so I started following him, and I listened to this one little back and forth between this girl who was playing tennis going, "Hey, I work hard like everybody else does, and I'm not getting any better. What's wrong?" He goes, "What you're doing is you're focusing on the result, not what you can control. The outcome will be determined on what you do throughout your practice or your strategy. The result is just is not your goal. The result's not your goal. That will happen. Your result is controlling what you can control out there and putting in the time and following your strategy." And I use that in darts, where I said, what is available to me on the board? What can I do that the other player cannot control? And not focusing on the overall win, but focusing on within the game. So like you're saying, process, and it really helped me, my mindset of like, let's not look at the big picture. Let's look at these little small steps, because at the end, the small steps will lead to a potential positive outcome. Yep. And I think when you're going through these things, you're at mile 50 and this is your possible out. You're going, well, okay, well, that's just one step. I have to look at the totality of what I've done so far. I don't quit now. It's just one step in the process. Now I go to the next step without looking at, oh my God, will I make the cutoff, or I don't want to do this? Let me just go one more step and see what happens.
Yeah, let's just go one more step. I had those, I got to make it to mile 13. And then I'm like, well, half marathon's a good day. Yeah. And then I'm like, okay, no, make it to mile 20 because you've done the first 20 miles before. Oh, mile 20 is a really good day. Well, if you've gone to 20, you might as well make it a marathon. A marathon's a great day. You know what? There's no harm in quitting after the marathon. But then I'm like, well, there's no way out. There's no way for me to leave once I hit 26.2.
Yes.
So then I'm like, make it to mile 28. You're going to see your friend Phil, who I work with at Lifetime because he was a volunteer. Gave him a big hug, told him I was struggling. And then I'm like, there's no way out. I'd have to wait for him to drive me back. I don't want to wait. I'm going to keep going. Get to mile 43 because most of the elevation has happened when you get to mile 43. And at that point, because I was very strategic and how I was going to execute, I held back a lot on the first 40 miles running on the downhill on the trails, because that's not my strength, but running downhill on dirt roads and paved roads is. And so I actually ended up passing a lot of people because I knew the downhill roads and the downhill dirt roads were coming up. And that boosted my motivation a little bit. And at the same time, I'm like, whatever. I just want to get done as fast as I can get done.
You said you were thinking about the kids you teach in swimming and coach in swimming and what you would say to them, or going through scenarios of, when I go back to work on this day at Lifetime Fitness, what are they're going to ask me, and what will I say? I think about those things too, of like, what am I going to say to someone during this section of what I just experienced? And if I quit, it's all for naught. I need to coach myself up, and I used that technique over the last couple of days. I was really bummed of my dart game, and it wasn't bad. We still crushed. We won 15. We played 19 games. We won 15-4, but I didn't care about the win. Other team wasn't that good. It wasn't about the win. It was about how I played. And then when on my way home, the next day, I was thinking, what would I tell myself? And I started I stepped outside of my head, my body, and I go, all right, tell Dave that it was just one game. It was one match, and you still got 2 more to go, and you're in a good position. Let's just start from scratch. Let's take these small pieces. Let's go 1 week at a time. And you could do this too with your trail runs. Like, let's go the next aid station at a time, or this next section at a time, but only take it in those pieces. Don't look at the next 12 miles, look at the next 3 miles, because that's something you can digest.
That's something you can digest. And that's, you mentioned that, and that's what I struggled with. Like, I know that, but the week before the race, I couldn't break it up. I just kept thinking of the big picture. I kept thinking of 74 miles, 25 hours. And I'm like, why are you thinking about the big picture? And I just could not get 74 miles out of my head. I've run 100 miles once. That was back in 2013 in Steamboat, Colorado. I did finish 100 miles once, and I was just in a different place because that was like my second year of ultra running, and I was such a newbie. And again, I had no right being there, but I didn't know that at the time. And so again, I just don't have the experience going I've done a lot of 50s. I don't have experience going beyond 50. And now that I have this one experience, I think it's going to make everything else easier. And I wanted to also mention one other thing that kind of helped get me to the finish line was intention. I had set my goals. I had told everyone I have 25 hours. I intend to finish. That's my number one goal. And intention's always important to me as a coach and an athlete, is to, do what you say you're going to do if you can, and you're healthy and not hurt or not sick. If you can do it, if you can walk, then walk as far as you can. And my intention was, I can walk for 25 hours and hopefully that'll get me to the finish line. And so I just really had to keep reminding myself of the intention, and that's part of the why. And part of my why, once I got to Amicalola, I ran from Bogle State Park to Amicalola, and I saw the sign, the first sign I saw that I was in Amicalola State Park. I just smiled, and I'm like, this is my why. I have 3 more miles. It's going to be the toughest 3 miles, but it doesn't matter because I made it. And I was so happy that part of my why was to experience running from Bogle State Park to Amicalola. And I kind of kept trying to convince myself, but until I was in Amicalola Falls State Park, there's this whole sigh of relief and this overwhelming feeling of you made it. Your why is stronger than anything, and having that why is so important in an endurance event. It's so important.
Well, they talk about the discipline, the mental discipline of anything you do physically can overcome the pain if you just fight through it, or I've heard this, I think I said this many, many podcasts ago. I interviewed Pete Jacobson after he won, or he was second place at Ironman Lake Placid, and he says, sometimes I cut off my head and don't feel my body, and I just go, and I forget about what's below my neck, and I just do the race. And I've used that idea too of like, I tell my body, sorry, we're not stopping, or I'm sorry, we're going faster. And it's a game that you have to play, these little mental games with yourself, and they can. Whenever I've done those, I usually win. But if the mind is weak, then it's over. It's like I'm looking for a way out. I'm looking for signs to stop versus looking for signs to keep going. And if you look for those signs, you place those signs along that 74-mile route. All right, once I get here, sweet. Now I can go a little bit more. Okay, now I've made it to 26. Now I can go to 50. I've made it to 50. I'm already 2/3 done. I got it. Let's go to the next one. Let me look at that sign. Look for reasons to keep going, not for reasons to stop.
Right.
Yeah. We had some bullet points we wanted to hit in your in this recap.
Yeah.
Did we hit all of them or not?
Well, one thing I want to talk a little bit about failure, because someone posted, I did a Facebook post and someone responded, not wanting to fail is in your genetics. And so I just really wanted to talk about failure, because I honestly believe without my failure, I would not have had all my successes in the last 30 years, plus myself as a youth swimmer. I think for me, I've failed many times, and that has actually led to my success. And I never once during my race felt like not finishing was a failure, because I truly believe failing in the proper definition of the word failure is a great opportunity to learn. And so I was giving myself permission not to finish, again, to use as just a learning opportunity to learn, like, maybe you just overextended your goal and this, it's okay. And maybe you just don't need to run farther than 50 miles, and that's okay. And the race director actually said at the pre-race meeting, if you don't finish, no one's going to care except you. And I believe that to be the truth. I think too often people get so concerned about, and I used to do this too, get so concerned about what others were going to think of them if they did a DNF or even a did not start, for that matter. And really, no one else really does care except yourself. And I think that's an important point to learn. And I think a quote, I don't remember where I found this quote, but failure is not a negative word. It sets you up for success. Learn to fail. Learning how to fail isn't fun, but it's definitely vital. And how to define failure as a missed opportunity to learning. That definitely hits it on the head. It's a missed opportunity to learn. So to say that, not failing is in my genetics, I'm going to say is not true. I think me accepting failure, how everyone defines failure, has led to my successes. So it's definitely in my genetics to fail and learn.
I think it's great it sets you up to recalibrate you. It helps you get on the right course. It's like, oh, this is not working. Okay, I'll do this. I can't keep this route up because it's not working. Okay, change directions. Yeah, whether it's your training. I'm getting injured. Well, obviously you're doing something wrong. Change it up. And if you're doing it great, awesome. But you have to start doing something to see if it's right or wrong. And if you feel like you failed, great. Fail more often. That way you're closer to success.
Yeah. And I believe that, and I try to always express that and coach that to my athletes is, define failure. It's going to be a little bit different definition depending on who you are. And it sounds so horrible. The word failure just sounds like a bad word, but it's actually, it's a good thing. And I felt personally that I failed during my race in the sense that I didn't enjoy what I was doing. I was not positive. I said the F-bomb internally multiple times. And I'm disappointed in myself for feeling so negative during the race. But in hindsight, it's what needed to happen to get out all these emotions and to have all these learning experiences and just experience and just allow myself to experience what I was experiencing is going to help drive me to the next event and the next goal.
There's something that Michael Jordan talked about in his The Last Dance series that he has. I forget where it is right now on ESPN or HBO, whatever. But he talked about he would have to create scenarios to challenge himself because he was so great that he would create stories of someone saying something bad to him or like he wasn't good enough or we're gonna stop you. He would create ideas. And I find myself I don't know where it came from. I have an idea where it came from. It's deep seated, but I don't know if I have a chip on my shoulder, but I also almost use this phrase in a positive, like, tell me I can't. I need you to tell me I can't, because that fires me up. People sometimes are inner motivated. Some people are externally motivated. I like to be externally motivated. I'm not saying as a negative. It's not for me a negative. For other people, it might be. Like, you need to be, self-motivated. Sure, okay, I have been. But I need someone to chase. And it's not myself sometimes. It's somebody else. Or I need someone who I need to make the villain. And it's just it might be a little sick, but I need someone to tell me I can't. I need someone to be the bad guy. And it helps me succeed. And that's just my sick way of doing better. Like there's a pro dart player that I know I like. He's an okay guy. He's a good guy, but I want him to be the guy I want to beat. And it's nothing personal. It's I need to create somebody, and he's an actual physical person that I want to say, I need to beat you. I can't, but I need to strive for it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I believe what you said too. Tell me I can't, and I'll show you I will.
Yeah.
That went through my mind in the 20 hours I was out there.
And the FUs, you're saying the F bombs, like, yeah, that's I personally need those too, like F you, or like, Dave, you're a quitter. I know it's very negative. It's like, you're going to quit. No, I'm not. I need to have these little conversations. So if you have an F bomb, sometimes it fires you up, and you need to get it out of your system to recenter, and then you're back on track. I don't know.
Yeah. Racing and trainings, it changes people, and I've been doing this for 30 years, and I've had a lot of, my life as a result of basically me entering the sport of triathlon 30 years ago. I mean, if I didn't do start triathlon 30 years ago, I don't know where I'd be today. And so, I try to tell athletes I coach, when you finish your first race, maybe it's a sprint, maybe it's a 5K, maybe it's a half Ironman, you finish your first sprint, and then you finish your first half, and then you finish your first full. It just changes you, because there's so much emotion, physical and mental energy that goes into the process of the event and the finish of the event. And things just happen. I
think you stand taller too. Your shoulders are back a little more. You're a little more confident in your walk, that maybe only you will notice once you make these accomplishments in these steps of sprint, Olympic, half full, ultras, whatever it may be. You're finish your first race.
Yeah.
The next day you'll feel a little different, and maybe you can keep that momentum in the sport or just in life, because you will be a different person. Hopefully, most likely, a better person. On your outlook of, I did something, I accomplished something, means I can do it again.
Yeah.
And now you've hit that 74, you hit 100, you hit a 74, so now your confidence has been raised. Your ceiling's been raised from the 50s to now 70s.
Absolutely. Will I do 100? I probably will. And let me explain. So I've always, the first 100 I did, Run Rabbit Run again, because I had a great support crew. It's in Colorado. It's my first one. I have way more experience. I like to see how I would do on that course with more experience. Also, that I can apply to the Western States 100 lottery. And so that would be a cool thing to get into Western States. And that's a 100-mile run, because I would have a different why, and I'd have a different motivation and a different reason of doing that. And I can also apply for what's called the UTMB, which is the Ironman World Championship of ultra running. It's in France. So I won a ticket to apply for that lottery. So there's a lot of different positive things that happen because I finished the Georgia Death Race, that I'm kind of like, okay, there's more to this than I realized. I have my sights set on other things now because of this outcome of this race.
Well, the doors that just opened, the opportunities that just presented themselves that you would have never had you given up or said, I'm done. Yeah. I mean, it's an invitation to something that could change the trajectory of your endurance life.
Right.
Well, with that, let's wrap up this ultra episode of the Endurance Hour podcast. Again, congratulations to Wendy. You can see some of her race reports, or her race report, that is, on Facebook. And you also put it on Instagram, is that right?
Instagram as well, yeah.
Okay, cool. She kind of breaks down, how many people started, how many people finished, some other details about it. It's pretty good. It's a nice little race recap write-up. So check that out on her social media. For Wendy Mader, I'm Dave Erickson. Thanks so much for listening. Have a great week of training, racing, and more importantly for Wendy, recovery. We'll see you next time. Adios.
Adios.